My name is Jean Anderson, and I am 67, a retired senior partner from one of the state's top law firms. Since my husband George passed away 12 years ago, I've devoted everything to my daughter. But when I discovered her true feelings about my multi-million-dollar inheritance, it shattered everything I believed about family, love, and the price of a mother's devotion. I am still processing all of this as I tell you. I wonder if any of you watching have been through something similar. Please let me know where you are from in the comments. Sometimes it helps to know I am not alone in this. If my story resonates with you, subscribe, because there is more I need to share. What happened next completely blindsided me. The gentle crackling of the fire was my only company in this old house. Outside, December's bitter wind sent dried leaves dancing across the porch like whispered secrets. At 67, my retirement should have been peaceful. But beneath the quiet, a deep loneliness gnawed at me that I couldn't shake. To most people, I look like any ordinary widow living alone in an aging house. What they don't know is that I own 2 properties and have $2.5 million in investment accounts, plus a 10% stake in the prestigious law firm where I worked for 35 years. I earned every penny through blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. I was once one of the most feared names in financial and family law, a woman who could make opposing lawyers shake with just one well-crafted argument. But none of this matters to my daughter, Amanda. Or maybe she just doesn't care. I stared at the faded photo above the fireplace, a much younger Amanda beaming in my late husband George's arms. Her hair was in neat pigtails, her eyes bright with pure joy. Back then, she was my whole world. After George died suddenly of a heart attack 12 years ago, I gave everything to raising her, supporting her dreams, and making her happy. I remember writing the check for her college tuition, $150,000 for her degree from an elite private university. I remember the satisfaction of giving $80,000 for the down payment on her first home with James. I recall spending $45,000 on her dream wedding, complete with ice sculptures and a 12-piece orchestra. Over 8 years, I faithfully sent her $500 each month for family emergencies, totaling $48,000. I covered 3 years of private school for my grandchildren Sarah and Leo, another $35,000, add the countless other emergencies and favors, and I'd invested nearly $400,000 in her happiness. I had never once expected anything in return. I believed, perhaps naively, that maternal love was supposed to be an act of pure, selfless giving. However, 10 years can change everything. And people, most of all, Amanda married James Morrison, the eldest son of one of the most influential real estate development families in our state. From that moment forward, the sweet little girl I had raised seemed to vanish completely. In her place stood a woman consumed by vanity, arrogance, and an insatiable hunger for material status. She rarely bothered to say thank you anymore, and our phone conversations became increasingly brief and superficial. James, my son-in-law, had initially treated me with cool indifference, but over the years his attitude had evolved into barely concealed contempt. His mother, Patricia Morrison, served as the catalyst for much of the family conflict. In her world, I was nothing more than a not quite good enough poor relation, a blemish on their gleaming upper-class facade. She consistently undermined me in Amanda's presence, painting me as an embarrassment to their social standing. Most painfully of all, Amanda never once defended me against her mother-in-law's cruel remarks. For 3 consecutive years now, I had been excluded from every family gathering, every holiday celebration, every milestone event. The last time I had shared a meal at their dining table was Christmas of 2021. Since then, my holidays consisted of nothing but the lonely crackling of my fireplace and my own silent thoughts. Amanda had even begun restricting my access to my own grandchildren. Sarah and Leo, who had once climbed onto my lap for stories and hugs, now spoke to me on the phone with voices that carried an unmistakable distance and formality. When Sarah turned 13 this past September, I sent her a birthday check for $500. I never received so much as a text message of acknowledgement. When I underwent knee replacement surgery last spring and spent 3 days alone in the hospital, Amanda managed only a perfunctory phone call that lasted less than 3 minutes. When I invited her to accompany me to see a revival of My Fair Lady on Broadway, something I had been looking forward to for months, she dismissed me with a curt "too busy." The most heartbreaking incident had occurred just last month during Thanksgiving. I had spent 2 entire days preparing a traditional feast for the entire family, including James's parents Frank and Patricia. The turkey was perfectly roasted, golden and succulent. The stuffing was made from my mother's recipe, passed down through 3 generations. The pumpkin pie filled the house with the warm scent of cinnamon and nutmeg. When they arrived, they ate with the detached politeness of restaurant patrons, then rose from the table and departed like dignitaries who had fulfilled an obligation. Not one person offered to help clear the dishes. No one lingered for conversation or coffee. No one offered a genuine word of gratitude for the love and effort I had poured into that meal. I sat alone at that table until well past midnight, surrounded by dirty plates and empty serving dishes, and something deep within my heart began to grow cold and hard. The telephone's sharp ring shattered the quiet of the afternoon. It was Amanda. My heart involuntarily skipped a beat, and a tiny flame of hope flickered to life in my chest. Perhaps she was calling to invite me for Christmas dinner. "Mother," her voice carried an artificially bright tone. "I wanted to tell you about our Christmas plans this year. Frank is coming into town, and Patricia will be here too. We have decided to celebrate at the country club's private dining room. They have an absolutely wonderful Christmas buffet." Hope blazed within me like a sudden bonfire. "That sounds lovely," I exclaimed, already envisioning the warmth of holiday lights and the joy of being surrounded by family again. "I will bring my homemade cranberry sauce and those traditional gingerbread cookies you used to love as a child. What time should I arrive?" The silence that followed was long, suffocating, and absolutely devastating. That silence pierced my hopeful heart like a frozen needle. "Well, Mother," Amanda's voice became hesitant and muffled, as though she were speaking through cotton. This is going to be quite an upscale event. Frank wants to invite some business associates. Patricia mentioned that the seating is already fixed, and perhaps, maybe this year you could celebrate at your own house? We could come visit you the day after." My blood seemed to freeze in my veins. The entire world fell silent, except for her words echoing in my ears like a death knell. "I cannot come." I managed to whisper, using every ounce of strength I possessed to form those words. "Mother, do not be like that." Her tone carried a note of irritation, as though I were an unreasonable child throwing a tantrum. "This is not personal, it is just logical." Logical, a word that had once been my greatest tool and closest ally. In courtrooms, I had wielded logic like a sword, winning case after case for my clients. Now, my own daughter was using that same word to logically exclude me from her family, from my grandchildren's Christmas, from her life. I said nothing more. After the call ended, I sat quietly in my armchair, while the sky outside turned the color of ash, matching the state of my heart. Logic. Very well, Amanda. If logic is what you want, then logic is exactly what you shall receive. In that moment, something that had been dormant for years awakened within me, not the grief of a heartbroken mother, but the cold, calculating mind of a seasoned attorney. My cell phone vibrated with a text message. It was from James. This was the first time in several years that he had contacted me directly. I stared at the words on the screen, each one hitting me like a stone thrown at glass. "Patricia mentioned we need some of the silver from your house for the event. The antique service for 12. Can you leave it at Amanda's by tomorrow? By the way, we will not be needing any contributions from you for the meal. Patricia is handling everything, James." I stared at that message for a very long time, unable to look away. That silver service had been my mother's, passed down through 4 generations of Anderson women. It had witnessed decades of family celebrations, holidays, and gatherings. I had never, not once, offered to lend it to them. James had not even asked. He had simply issued a command, as though my precious family heirloom belonged to them by right. We will not be needing any contributions from you for the meal. This sentence was perhaps the most insulting of all. Not only were they excluding me from their celebration, they were commandeering my treasured possessions to decorate their upscale party. My finger hovered over the screen for a long time. Finally, I typed 4 words in response. I will consider it. Those 4 words contained no anger, no sadness, only an ominous calm. I discovered the photograph on Facebook. A distant cousin had shared it from Amanda's Instagram account. The image showed the opulent main hall of the country club, all gold fixtures and crystal chandeliers. Amanda wore an expensive evening gown, her arm linked with James's, while the children stood in front of them. The family of 4 looked radiantly happy. In the background, Patricia was engaged in animated conversation with several elegantly dressed guests. The caption read, "Christmas is coming. Celebrating with my real family. Family matters. Blessed. Worth it." Real family. My eyes remained fixed on those 2 words as though they were written in fire. So I was not part of her real family. The mother who had sacrificed everything for her happiness had become nothing more than a superfluous, unworthy presence. Even more devastating was the comment section. Patricia Morrison had written in her characteristically haughty tone, "Finally, a Christmas celebration with proper taste. In that photograph, there was no space for me. In that entire post, not a single word acknowledged my existence. I had been erased as completely as a mistake corrected with white out. I sat in my study, surrounded by the memories of a lifetime. My college diploma hung on the wall beside my wedding portrait with George. Amanda's childhood drawings, crooked and endearing, were carefully preserved in frames on my bookshelf. The air smelled of old paper and leather binding. From the bottom drawer of my desk, I retrieved a faded brown envelope containing every letter and card Amanda had written to me throughout her life. My fingers trembled as I pulled out one particular note, written when she was 16 years old. "Dearest Mother, I will never forget everything you have done for me. You are my hero. When I grow up, I will take care of you just like you have taken care of me. I love you forever and always, Amanda." Tears finally broke through the dam I had built around my heart, sliding silently down my cheeks. The girl who had once called me her hero now considered my presence an embarrassment. I placed the letter down, closed my eyes, and allowed the pain to wash over me like an ocean tide. But this time, when the tide receded, it left behind not the soft sand of despair, but the hard, unyielding rock of resolve. I wiped away my tears and opened my laptop computer. I logged into my law firm's secure portal, where my partnership equity was clearly displayed in cold, precise numbers. I opened my investment portfolio, watching that long string of digits representing $2.5 million glow on the screen, like distant stars. I accessed my property documents, where the deeds to both of my houses lay in encrypted digital folders. Then I opened a special folder containing 10 years of carefully preserved email and text message records. Amanda's broken promises, James's contemptuous remarks, Patricia's cutting insults. Piece by piece, item by item, they lay before me like evidence in a criminal trial. In that moment, a decision crystallized in my mind with absolute clarity. I would not rage and scream like a wounded animal that would be both undignified and ineffective. I would be smarter. I would respond using the very tools they respected and feared most. I walked to the corner of my study where an unremarkable safe sat hidden behind a stack of law journals. After entering the combination, I opened the heavy door and reached into the deepest recess. From there, I retrieved a dust-covered legal file folder from 30 years past. It contained records from a case my late husband George had worked on as a junior partner. George had been a meticulous man who kept copies of everything. Inside this folder were some very interesting documents related to Frank Morrison, records of certain activities he undoubtedly believed had been buried by time and forgotten by history. My fingers traced over those yellowed pages, and for the first time in over 30 years, the cold smile of a seasoned litigator spread across my face. I picked up my phone and dialed a number from memory. "Robert, it is Jean. My brother's sleepy voice came through the speaker. "Jean, do you realize what time it is?" "Yes, I know it is late, but I need your help." My voice was steady and determined. "I need you to use your resources to conduct a special investigation. The subject is Frank Morrison." Robert served as director of the Special Investigations Unit for the Federal Prosecutor's Office. 30 years in law enforcement had given him access to powerful legal and political networks. He was silent for several seconds. Then his voice became serious. "Tell me what you need." 8 o'clock in the morning brought Amanda's call, right on schedule. Her voice carried a note of uncertainty, as though she were performing an unpleasant but necessary task. "Mother, I just wanted to confirm. You will not be showing up at the country club on Christmas Eve, right? Patricia has emphasized repeatedly that the guest list is absolutely final. She said it would be terribly awkward if you appeared." I leaned back in my armchair, watching the delicate snowflakes drifting past my window, surprised by how calm my own voice sounded. "Amanda, my dear, I will not be appearing at the country club. You need not worry about that." She seemed to exhale with enormous relief. "Thank you, Mother. I always so understanding." "I understand many things," I replied, my tone carrying a quality she had never heard before. At noon, I sat at my desk and composed an email with 3 recipients: Frank Morrison, Director of the State Commerce Board, James Morrison III, and a senior prosecutor from the State Attorney General's office, a close colleague of my brother Robert. The subject line was concise. To Mr. Frank Morrison, regarding important legal matters requiring discussion. To Mr. James Morrison, regarding urgent legal affairs concerning your father. The email content was professional and measured. Writing as a former senior attorney, I stated that I had recently discovered certain documents from a real estate transaction dating back 30 years involving Mr. Frank Morrison and potentially questionable financial operations. I emphasized that as an attorney with professional obligations, I had a duty to disclose these possible violations to appropriate authorities. Finally, I politely requested that Mr. Morrison contact me before December 26, giving him an opportunity to explain these matters before any information would be publicly disclosed. I clicked send, like placing a crucial piece on a chessboard. Checkmate. 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I could easily imagine the chaos that erupted in Frank Morrison's office after 3. That afternoon, the ghost of 30 years past had come calling at the height of his career, when he felt most secure and untouchable. He would immediately understand that his political career, if not his personal freedom, now hung by the thinnest of threads. At 5 o'clock, he called James. I could not hear their conversation, but I could easily construct it in my mind. "Your wife's mother just issued a legal threat against me." "What right does she have to do that?" "Because 30 years ago I did some things that were not entirely clean." "Dad, this is insane, James. I do not care what you have to do. Find out what she wants now." At 7 o'clock in the evening, James called Amanda's cell phone. I could imagine his panicked, furious shouting, "What the hell has your mother done?" "What?" "James, what is wrong? Your mother." She sent my father an email threatening legal action about something from 30 years ago, and she copied the state prosecutor's office. Amanda's voice would be trembling. "That is impossible. Mother would not do that. She is such a gentle person. Now I need you to call her immediately and find out what she wants and how we can make this disappear." My phone finally rang. It was Amanda, Mother. She was screaming before I could say hello, her voice full of anxiety and rage. "James just told me you made some kind of legal threat against Frank. Have you lost your mind? This could destroy everything for us." I was sitting peacefully in my armchair, slowly sipping a cup of Earl Grey tea. Outside my window, snowflakes danced in the glow of the street lamps, like a host of tiny spirits. "Amanda, dear, I made no threats whatsoever." I took another sip of tea, my voice perfectly steady. I was simply fulfilling my professional obligations as a former attorney. If Mr. Morrison's conduct was entirely proper, then there is nothing to worry about. "But, Mother, you cannot do this. He is James's father." I had noticed that. I said, my tone carrying a trace of icy irony. For years, no one in this family seemed to care that I am your mother. Now, suddenly, family relationships have become important. How interesting. Mother, this is blackmail, she shrieked hysterically. No, Amanda, blackmail is the illegal demand for money or benefits in exchange for silence. I have made no demands whatsoever. I am simply doing what is right. I paused, delivering the final blow. Of course, if Mr. Morrison wishes to avoid having me disclose this information to the authorities, he has 24 hours to meet with me personally and explain everything to my satisfaction. Perhaps we can reach some sort of understanding. Amanda began to cry, the desperate, pleading kind of sobbing that tears at a mother's heart. Mother, please, I am begging you. What you are doing will hurt James, hurt the children. I closed my eyes, seeing that Instagram post about her real family flash through my mind. My voice remained unwavering. You should have considered that on December 15th, when you told me I was not good enough to sit at your Christmas table. I hung up the phone. Frank Morrison did not go to the country club. He spent the entire night on conference calls with his legal team. Under enormous pressure, he confessed everything about 30 years ago, how he had defrauded business partners, concealed funds, and naively believed all evidence had been destroyed long ago. His attorneys gave him the most direct advice possible. Facing a top-tier lawyer with 35 years of experience whose brother happened to be a federal prosecutor, any hope of denial or cover-up would be suicidal. If Jean disclosed everything, he would face multiple felony charges, including tax evasion, securities fraud, and obstruction of justice, plus countless civil lawsuits. His political career would be utterly destroyed, and he might well face prison time. The only way out was voluntary surrender, hoping for leniency. On Christmas morning, while children in other homes were unwrapping presents, State Commerce Board Director Frank Morrison walked into the federal prosecutor's office. He brought all relevant documents, a detailed confession, and a humble attitude prepared for plea negotiations. Patricia waited all morning at the country club for her husband, who never came. When she learned Frank would not be attending, and he refused to explain why, her carefully maintained face contorted with rage. James called my phone over and over, but I did not answer. Amanda spent the entire Christmas in tears. Sarah and Leo asked in confusion, "Why is no one happy?" No one could give them an answer. The country club's Christmas dinner proceeded as Frank's empty chair loomed like a black hole, sucking away all joy from the room. No one could taste the food. No one raised glasses in celebration. Patricia struggled to maintain her haughty smile, but it looked more painful than weeping. And I sat alone by my fireplace, listening to classical music and reading a book I had long wanted to enjoy. The air was filled with the aroma of gingerbread I had baked for myself. It was the most peaceful, satisfying Christmas I had experienced in 10 years. The next morning, a familiar Range Rover pulled into my driveway. Amanda and James appeared at my door, both faces etched with exhaustion and anxiety. I let them in, calmly served them tea, then sat down and waited. "Mother," Amanda spoke first, her voice hoarse. "We need to talk about what you did to Frank." "I did nothing to Frank," I corrected her quietly. "Everything that happened was the result of his own actions." I simply reminded him of certain facts. "But why?" James finally exploded, his voice filled with suppressed rage. "Why did you betray us like this?" I gently placed my teacup down, the porcelain making a soft clink against the saucer. I looked directly into his eyes. Betrayal. "James, tell me, in the past 10 years, when have I ever betrayed you in any way? When have I shown you anything but respect? Never." "But tell me," I interrupted, turning to my daughter, "when I spent nearly $400,000 on your education, your wedding, your house, and you could not even spare me a seat at your Christmas table because I was not upscale enough, exactly who betrayed? Whom?" Amanda's tears burst forth immediately. "Mother, I am sorry. I did not know." "What did you not know?" For the first time, my voice became sharp and cutting. "You did no know about gratitude, about respect? Or did you simply choose to forget because in your eyes I am nothing but an embarrassing old woman who gets in your way? It was not like that. It was exactly like that, I said, then took a deep breath and returned to my calm tone. You know what I am going to do now. My attorney is drafting a new will. I had originally planned to leave the vast majority of my estate to you, Amanda, including assets you could never hope to acquire through your own efforts. But now, everything will go to charity, specifically to organizations that provide housing and medical care for elderly people abandoned by their families. Amanda's face turned ashen. Furthermore, I continued, each word precise as a surgeon's scalpel. I have spoken with my law firm partners. They unanimously recommend filing a civil lawsuit to recover all the money I have given you over the past 10 years as gifts, with interest calculated. A rough estimate puts your debt to me at approximately $600,000. You cannot do this, James burst out. Look at me, James, I said. My gaze as cold as winter ice. Look into my eyes and tell me you truly believe I will not do exactly what I say. He backed down. His arrogance crumbled under my stare. He looked away. Finally, I delivered the final blow. That house you are living in, the land it sits on, is titled in my name. Yes, I purchased that property 20 years ago, wanting to ensure you had a stable home. The deed has always been in my late husband George's name, which I inherited. I am considering reclaiming that land. Amanda let out a sharp cry. What? Mother? No, that is our home. If I remember correctly, I said slowly, quoting her Instagram post, you have a real family, one that appreciates proper taste. Perhaps they can provide you with somewhere to live. Spring arrived, and the cherry tree in my yard bloomed like clouds of pink and white silk. Amanda and James's house was not forcibly reclaimed, but under enormous legal and financial pressure, they were forced to sell it to pay off bank loans and part of their debt to me. They now rent a small apartment across town. Frank Morrison reached a plea agreement with prosecutors. He resigned from all public positions, faces substantial fines and community service, and his political career is permanently over. The once mighty Morrison family name is now synonymous with scandal and disgrace. Patricia, unable to bear the humiliation, has cut off all contact with her son's family. James's real estate business has collapsed due to his father's disgrace. I ultimately did not pursue the civil lawsuit to its conclusion. After they agreed to pay a settlement of $40,000, I dropped the case. This was not from softness of heart, but rather a calculated gesture of superiority. That sum was a fortune to them, but meaningless to me. It perfectly illustrated the insurmountable gulf between our positions. I accepted the money not to compensate for my losses, but to ensure they would never forget this lesson. A month later, I began receiving text messages from Sarah and Leo. They asked if they could visit me on weekends like they used to. Amanda initially objected strongly, but after several failed attempts to maintain control, she finally understood that if she wanted her children to rebuild their relationship with their grandmother, she would have to learn respect. So my weekends became lively again. Sarah and Leo come to my kitchen to help me bake cookies. They listen to my stories about their mother's childhood, tales of a different time when family meant something more than social status. We are slowly relearning what true family looks like. One Saturday afternoon, sunlight streamed through my kitchen window as Sarah pressed cookie cutters into the dough. She looked up at me with her bright, curious eyes. "Grandma, why did you let Mother and Dad back into your life? You could have never forgiven them." I smiled and leaned down to kiss her soft hair, because, darling, forgiveness is not for them. It is for me. I did not want to spend the rest of my life consumed by hatred. I looked into her clear eyes and explained seriously, but forgiveness does not mean forgetting, and it certainly does not mean continuing to tolerate bad behavior. It means I have turned to a new page in my life, and they must learn to face the consequences of their actions. Sarah nodded with the wisdom that sometimes emerges from children, though I could see she did not fully understand everything yet. But the light in her eyes told me that a seed about respect and boundaries had been planted in her young heart. I looked out at the blooming cherry tree, feeling a peace I had never known before. I had finally reclaimed my dignity, my worth, my rightful place in this world. This old house was no longer an empty shell filled with loneliness, but my unshakable castle, and I was its undisputed queen. The fire continued to crackle in the hearth, but now it no longer provided my only companionship. It simply added warmth to a home that had finally become whole again. A home where love was earned and respect was required, where an elderly woman had proven that even at 67, she could still fight for her worth and win. As the seasons turned and my garden flourished under my careful tending, I found myself reflecting on the nature of family and the true meaning of love. There were mornings when I would sit at my kitchen table, watching the sunrise paint golden streaks across my walls, and I would think about the woman I had become, not the broken, discarded mother I had been just 1 year ago, but a woman who had rediscovered her own strength and value. The transformation had not been easy. There were nights when I lay awake, wondering if I had been too harsh, too calculating in my response to their cruelty. But then I would remember that photograph, that casual dismissal of me as not part of the real family, and I knew that sometimes love requires boundaries. Sometimes love requires consequences. Amanda now calls me every Sunday evening. Our conversations are stilted at first, formal in a way that breaks my heart, but gradually, week by week, I hear something in her voice that had been missing for so long: genuine respect. She no longer takes my presence in her life for granted. She no longer assumes that my love means she can treat me with indifference or contempt. James has changed as well, though his transformation feels more pragmatic than heartfelt. He understands now that I am not merely an obstacle to be managed, or an embarrassment to be hidden. He has learned that I possess both the resources and the resolve to defend myself when necessary. Our relationship may never be warm, but it has become honest in its own way. Patricia Morrison has become a cautionary tale among their social circle. The woman who once lorded her superior status over me now finds herself isolated, her husband disgraced, her family reputation in ruins. I take no pleasure in her downfall, but neither do I mourn it. She created the circumstances that led to her own destruction through her arrogance and cruelty. The most profound change has been in my relationship with Sarah and Leo. They come to me now not out of obligation or guilt, but because they genuinely enjoy my company. We have established new traditions: Saturday morning pancakes with fresh berries from my garden, Sunday afternoon walks through the neighborhood where I tell them stories about the old days, and quiet evenings when we read together by the fireplace. Sarah, now 14, has begun confiding in me about her hopes and fears for the future. She speaks of wanting to become a teacher, of her desire to help children who feel lost or forgotten. I see in her eyes the same compassion that once drove me to pour everything into Amanda's happiness, but tempered with a wisdom about boundaries and self-respect that I was still learning when I was her age. Leo, at 11, still possesses the uncomplicated joy of childhood, but he too has learned valuable lessons from watching our family navigate crisis and reconciliation. He understands that love is not weakness, that kindness is not the same as being a pushover, and that sometimes the people we love most require the firmest boundaries. One evening, as autumn painted the leaves in shades of gold and scarlet, Amanda arrived at my door carrying a manila envelope. She looked nervous, almost shy, in a way that reminded me of the little girl she had once been. Inside, the envelope was a handwritten letter, several pages long in Amanda's careful script. It was an apology, but not the hurried, superficial kind she had offered in those first desperate weeks after Frank's downfall. This was thoughtful, detailed, painful in its honesty. She acknowledged every slight, every dismissal, every moment when she had chosen status over love. She wrote about the shame she felt when she looked back at her behavior, about the fear she had lived with, that she might have destroyed our relationship permanently. But more than an apology, it was a promise. A promise to never again take my love for granted, to defend me against anyone who would diminish or disrespect me, to teach her children that respect is not optional in a family, regardless of age or circumstances. As I read those pages, tears rolled down my cheeks, but they were tears of healing rather than sorrow. My daughter had found her way back to me, not through guilt or fear, but through genuine understanding and remorse. The letter concluded with words that echoed the note she had written me as a teenager. "You are my hero again, Mother, not because of what you gave me, but because of who you showed me you are. You taught me that love without respect is hollow, and that strength and kindness can coexist. I want to be the daughter you deserve, and I want my children to learn from your example how to love with dignity." That night, I placed the letter in the same drawer where I kept all of her childhood notes and drawings. But this time, it felt like the beginning of something new, rather than a relic of something lost. Instead, Amanda asked tentatively if she could help me prepare Christmas dinner in my own dining room, using my mother's china and the silver service that had nearly been commandeered for someone else's celebration. I agreed, but with conditions. There would be no phones at the dinner table, no discussions of business or social obligations, no subtle put-downs disguised as jokes, unfamily stories on the simple pleasure of being together without pretense or performance. The same china, the same silverware, even the same recipes, but everything felt completely different because the foundation had shifted. Respect had replaced entitlement. Gratitude had replaced assumption. Love had learned to coexist with boundaries. James arrived with a bottle of wine and an expression of genuine appreciation. Frank, of course, was not there, serving his community service and rebuilding his life from the ruins of his choices. Patricia had retreated to her sister's home in another state, too proud to face the social consequences of her family's disgrace. As we sat around the table, holding hands for the blessing, I looked at each face illuminated by candlelight. My family was smaller now, but it was also stronger. We had learned that true family is not about blood or obligation, but about mutual respect and genuine affection. We had discovered that love can be fierce without being destructive, that boundaries can strengthen rather than weaken relationships. During dinner, Sarah raised her glass of sparkling cider and made a toast that brought tears to my eyes. To Grandma, who taught us that love means never giving up on people, but also never giving up on yourself. As the evening drew to a close and the dishes were cleared, Amanda lingered after the others had gone home. We sat together by the fireplace, watching the flames dance and listening to the contented silence of a house filled with genuine warmth. "Mother," she said quietly, "I want you to know that I understand now what I almost lost. Not just your love, but your respect. And I understand why you had to fight for both." I reached over and took her hand, feeling for the first time in years that we were truly mother and daughter again, equals in our mutual affection and understanding. The fire crackled softly, but it was no longer my only companion. It simply provided warmth to a home where love had learned to grow strong roots, where an elderly woman had discovered that it is never too late to demand the respect you deserve, and where a family had learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the requirement that they rise to meet your standards rather than lowering your standards to meet their behavior. In the end, they had taught me the most valuable lesson of all, that blood may make you related, but only respect and genuine care make you family. And I had learned to surround myself only with those who understood the difference, creating a smaller circle perhaps, but one built on foundations strong enough to last a lifetime. The gentle crackling of my fire still provides companionship on quiet evenings, but now it is joined by the laughter of grandchildren who visit because they want to, the grateful voice of a daughter who has rediscovered the meaning of family, and the peaceful satisfaction of a woman who knows her worth and guards it wisely. At 68 now, I have learned that retirement is not about fading quietly into the background, but about choosing carefully where to spend the precious gift of your remaining years, and with whom you will share the wisdom earned through a lifetime of loving, losing, fighting, and ultimately, winning back your own dignity. That is the end of our story for today. We hope you enjoyed this journey of love and vengeance. We'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. Your insights and perspectives are what make our community truly special. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel to stay updated on the next captivating tale from Love Vengeance. Each like and share helps us continue to bring you stories that resonate. Thank you for spending your time with us. Until next time, take care and keep those stories close to your heart.